We now turn to some NBA action from last night. The Raptors defeated the Bucks 114-106, giving Toronto their fifth win in six bubble games, and the Bucks dropped to 2-4. Giannis did not play for the Bucks, but the Raptors chose to rest Kyle Lowry, Fred VanVleet, and Serge Ibaka. Chris Boucher and Matt Thomas combined for 47 points for Toronto, while Kyle Korver scored a team-high 19 for the Bucks. All right, Cody, in terms of the Eastern Conference playoffs, how big a threat are the Raptors to the top seed Bucks?
Well, as far as this game goes, I definitely you're not going to look at this game with who you just mentioned being out and go, oh well, clearly the Raptors are going to beat the Bucks. They won this game. This obviously no Giannis for Milwaukee, and then the Raptors probably smartly choosing to get a day of rest for some of these other guys. You can only surmise so much from the game itself, but I think one key you could look at from this game is basically how the non-Giannis minutes are going to go between these teams when you're talking about how big of a threat the Raptors could be to the Bucks. Because when we saw their series last year, where the Raptors came back and ultimately won that series, a lot of that series was decided when Milwaukee had to pull Giannis off the floor, and that is the benches and how the benches are going to match up, I think, is one of the keys here. So you had Chris Boucher and Matt Thomas. They both posted their career highs in the game, like you said. And that should signal to Nick Nurse that his available weapons to combat this Bucks juggernaut, they might be even deeper than he thought. We already knew this Raptor team is pretty loaded and they're pretty deep still. We talked about them last week, and we talked about how some of these other guys have really come around. And definitely this is I would argue, one of the more deeper rosters in the league. But they can roll out all these different lineups to get at Milwaukee. And some of these guys, even like Hollis Jefferson, he teeters more on how much offense he can give you, but the stable that they can go into for defensive help and lineup changes is something that most teams just don't have access to. So their management of those lineups when Giannis isn't on the floor is going to be pretty much the potential decision or deciding factor in the series, I think. Again, Raptors, you could go 10, 11 deep probably in that roster of like pretty solid dudes you could roll out, where I would say most teams you get to about 7 or 8, you start seeing those soft spots or those like spots, whereas, the Raptors, you can go deeper. But I would say as far as another way you could evaluate the threat that the Raptors present to the Bucks is really who's going to guard Giannis, right? So last year, Kawhi took up that duty while also shouldering a massive workload on offense. Remember, the Bucks were up early in that series. Giannis is averaging like 27 points per game, and the question really was, well, should Kawhi guard Giannis? And at first you think, well, of course he should. He's got giant hands and he's 7 foot. And he can he can smother Giannis. But you have to remember, he was being asked to do a lot on offense as well, and there was a serious, legitimate question of should Kawhi shoulder both of these burdens. I mean, one person only has so much energy. So it turned out it was the right answer, and that cheat code worked. His points per game dropped from 27 to 20, and he was far less efficient, and it brought him back. But you don't have that cheat code this year, but I don't know if they're going to need it. The Raptors have proven they're one of the best defensive teams, right, in the league, especially in the bubble as of late. And OG Anunoby has been a big reason for that. He's kind of become their sort of lockdown guy. And again, their defense goes beyond just one dude. I mean, they're not a team that, oh, that's our lockdown guy. Go get him, Tiger. But the metrics tell us that Anunoby has a nose for the ball. He generates a lot of turnovers to the Raptors, and they're those really good sort of offensive turnovers, those breakaway, fast break points. And the Raptors are profiting a lot of points off of his prowess on the ball. And he's just got a really good head for where the ball is, and he kind of knows where the offense is going. And this also frees up a lot of guys like Ibaka and Siakam to guard a lesser option, so they can focus more on their offensive side of the game and also their athleticism on the switches and traps when they do need him, because we know that guarding Giannis isn't a one-man job, no matter how good you are. I mean, you're going to need help. But if you have a guy like Anunoby, you can put on Giannis, attack the ball, cause him to maybe turn the ball over some, and you can get him a little flustered. Then when you have those switches and traps that the Raptors have and how good they are at doing them, I could really see the Raptors slowing Giannis down in a series enough to where, again, you're not going to stop the man either. It's kind of the old LeBron theory, like or Michael Jordan theory. You're not stopping him, but if you can just pump the brakes a little bit, maybe you have a chance. And I think when you look at those two main factors, that's where I look at where the Raptors could really make their money, which is, again, on the bench versus the Milwaukee bench, and on the defense of Giannis with how deep their rotation is. So the Bucks are going to need good games from Middleton during the series, and likely one of the few other guys. It feels like these teams are going to meet at some point. We're going to get a series. We know that Orlando and Brooklyn aren't going to do anything, so this is likely going to be a series we see in the second round or possibly the finals. And if they can use that kind of heady team defense, I think Toronto does present a pretty credible threat to the Bucks overall.
The Raptors are a threat. Raptors are a threat to the Bucks. And oh, by the way, the Bucks are clinched. They're in that second spot in the East. The Bucks are in the first spot. So it'll be if they meet, it'll be in the conference finals. Mm-hmm. I would say though up front, I am not backing out the position. I like Boston better than Toronto. So I'm still going Boston to meet Milwaukee in the conference finals. But we got to pay attention to Toronto because of their eliteness on the defensive end, and with the improvements made by Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet as well. He has taken another step in his development. OJ Anunoby back in the fray. And Milwaukee, for whatever reason, Milwaukee is not put together right now. I think a lot of what we're witnessing in this bubble is not everything that we're seeing is exactly what it seems. The Lakers, the Bucks, and even the Clippers have all been struggling one way or the other for whatever reason. And meanwhile, we got teams like Phoenix that just can't lose. I mean, you can't tell me that you can't tell me that all these things are real. When we get into the playoffs and guys stop resting people and we stop load managing, then we're actually going to know what we have. But there is reason for concern on Milwaukee's side because they've been horrific in a couple of areas. Number one, they stopped guarding. They stopped guarding people. They're looking like the Pelicans right now with the way they're defending. The one thing about Milwaukee, the way to beat them is similar to how you beat Virginia in the college ranks. Because Virginia, just like Milwaukee, they won't allow anything in the paint traditionally. So how do you beat them? Well, you have to make threes. And that's the one consistent thing you've been able to get against Milwaukee. But in this bubble, I mean, they're just letting people just get to the rim like it's okay and like it's acceptable, which I'm sure is driving Mike Budenholzer crazy. Because defense should be the constant thing. And that's why I'm not surprised of how well Toronto has played, because we know they lean on their defense. Offense comes and goes. Defense should be a constant. And it has been for Toronto. But my problem with Toronto beating Milwaukee in a 7-game series, and you brought him up, it's the name that we know, is Kawhi Leonard. And why does this matter? Well, pay attention. Well, think about this. Last year, Kawhi load managed his way through the season for Toronto. He missed 22 games. The Raptors were 17-5 in those games, so they can win without him. And they've had a great season this year. It's one of the reasons you're seeing Nick Nurse very high in the ranks for Coach of the Year. He's done an exceptional job. But the problem is when we get into the playoffs. Think about last year. The Raptors don't get out of the semifinals without Kawhi Leonard. We remember that series against Philadelphia. They don't make it without him. And to my eyes, they're going to have some difficulties when the second round starts after they, get over that bye week against Brooklyn.
Brooklyn is it. I think Brooklyn's going to play. Yeah.
Yeah, Brooklyn at this point. So, yeah, they'll cruise on past them, but they're going to have trouble against Boston. And if they get to Milwaukee, they're going to still struggle because it's all about at the end of the game. Who do you trust to close? You tell me who the closer is. Is it Siakam? It could be, but are you ready to go there with him? I'm not ready to go there with him. Don't give me Kyle Lowry. I mean, look, have we not forgot the myriad? Have we not forgot the days of Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan, where they were just no-shows in the playoffs, particularly against the likes of the Cavaliers when LeBron James was running the East? You couldn't find them. I mean, you could find them, but you need a microscope for some of those shooting percentages. They were horrific. Fred VanVleet, you're going to tell me he's going to beat you? I mean,
it's true.
So it's going to come down. You play against Milwaukee, it's going to come down to who can close games. Because I think it's very difficult to blow Toronto out because they guard so well. And like you talk about guarding Giannis, yeah, they're not putting anybody on Giannis. They'll put somebody on him, but it's going to be all 5 guys paying attention to him. And that's the reason Milwaukee lost last year. Yeah, Giannis struggled, but when you have the whole team attacking him, you're going to have some difficulty. Right. And then how about some other guys? Can we get some guys to hit shots? They stopped hitting shots. Milwaukee's 3-point shooting, I mean, they were among the best teams in the league at shooting threes. They still have so many dudes that hit threes. I mean, you can go down the list. Middleton, Brook Lopez, Pat Connaughton, Kyle Korver, George Hill. I mean, list goes on. Or Ilyasova, so many dudes. Yep. Except Bledsoe. I don't want to see Bledsoe shooting threes.
No.
I'm not getting on that. And that's when you talk about the non-Giannis minutes. That's when Bledsoe can actually be useful. He can actually attack the paint and not have to worry about Giannis needing some space. That's where he has to be effective. He's got to step up and figure some things out. But this is why last night really demonstrates, and this is not an awards segment, it demonstrates why Giannis is the MVP. Giannis doesn't play, so you're thinking, oh, well, Toronto, do the thing. But then you look at no Bar Soap, no Van Fleet, and no Ibaka, and I'm sorry, Bar Soap, Kyle Lowry, for the people who haven't heard that reference before. But none of those guys, so you would think, like, okay, Toronto's missing 3 key dudes. Milwaukee's missing the MVP, but Milwaukee should be able to compete in this game. And the next thing you know, we got Chris Boucher and Matt Thomas just doing whatever they feel like doing. And meanwhile, some of these other guys, I mean, for Milwaukee, think about it, you complimented Toronto's depth. Toronto, I mean, Boucher and Thomas, they don't play a lot. They don't. I mean, typically Nick Nurse will play 7 guys. And not to say that, guys like Hollis Jefferson and Boucher and those guys can't play, but they typically don't. Milwaukee, they play 10 deep normally. And there's quality depth all around. It's just incredible. But those guys are going to have to play because Toronto and Milwaukee, if they meet, Toronto's going to do what they have to do to make things tough on Giannis. Middleton and Bledsoe have got to particularly step up, and I anticipate they'll also need a big series from Brook Lopez. So there's serious concern right now, and also Milwaukee. The other problem, in addition to their defense, they got to be stronger with the ball and value it. The turnover numbers they're putting up are just terrible. They're not getting up enough shots, and they're giving up some easy baskets in transition. So they got to fix those things, and they got to use that first round series against the Magic to correct those things. Because once they get into the second round against Miami or Indiana, it's going to be game time, and they're going to have to bring more of their A game to get by those teams. And I think they're absolutely capable of it. And I still see them in the NBA Finals, but they got to be better than they are right now. But yes, Toronto's a credible threat. It's just not going to happen for me.